had pregnant Barbie as a kid. So I feel very certified to talk with you about these Barbies.
And I'm bad like the Barbie. I'm a doll, but I still wanna party.
Hello Barbie, what's up? Welcome back to my channel. My name's Alea. I decided that today I wanted to do something a little bit different because I went to the Barbie movie last weekend, as many of you did as well, I'm sure, and it was a lovely, fun, and fresh time. And so I was thinking, you know, how could I take the fun spark of Barbie and bring it into the booktube sphere? And so I decided that I'm gonna do a book recommendations video based on Barbies. So basically I'm gonna be pairing a book with the theme or the vibe or the aesthetic of a specific Barbie doll. So without any further ado, let's get into the recommendations. So, of course, our first Barbie had to be original Barbie because Margot Robbie absolutely was an icon with that scene in the movie. So, I thought the perfect book recommendation for original Barbie would be a romance. So, I picked Say Yes to the Marquess by Tessa Dare. So, this is a historical romance. Let's take a second to appreciate the step back, shall we, folks? And this is following a young woman named Cleo, and she's been waiting 8 years to marry this guy named Piers Brandon that she's engaged to, and he's been gallivanting around for work, and he has barely seen her at all in the last 8 years, and she doesn't really know this guy. And she's decided that she's inherited a castle, she's scraped together her pride, and she's ready to break off her engagement. And so she goes to his younger brother Rafe and says, "Listen, Rafe, I need you to sign these papers because I don't want to marry your brother." And Rafe says, "Absolutely not." And so he basically is determined to get Cleo to marry his brother, even if he has to plan the wedding himself. And he goes to Cleo's house with his friend, and he helps her like try on wedding dresses and sample all these different cakes and try and arrange the wedding. And Cleo is like not having any of it. And it feels like in this book, everybody thinks that Cleo is like original Barbie, that she is just, you know, like a hot blonde girl with money, and she just wants a stereotypical wedding, and then when she marries Piers, she'll just be like the perfect bride, and they'll have babies, and they'll live happily ever after. Well, that's not really what Cleo wants. Cleo has her own dreams and passions, and as they're trying to plan this wedding, she and her fiance's younger brother Rafe end up having a little bit of a spark happening, a little bit of a forbidden romance. And it's really cool because Rafe is a really hot prize fighter, and she really gives him a run for his money, and it's amazing. So I highly recommend this if you like original Barbie, because Cleo looks like the classic original Barbie, blonde hair, she's got money, she just inherited her own castle, like she doesn't need a man, you know what I'm saying? But dang, their romance is so spicy and fun, and I really like it. And I think this is also a good one to start with if you are like new to historical romances and you want to check it out. This is a really good place to start. It's technically the second book in a series, but you don't need to read book 1 to understand this because the characters are completely different and they're not really related at all. So there's that. And then, of course, Barbie is wonderful, but you can't have Barbie without a little Ken. So I thought it would be fun to do a little book recommendation for Ken as well. So I decided to be a little bit feral today, and so a couple of the books on this recommendations list are ones that are still on my TBR. So the one for Ken is one of those, and I picked out this horror novel that I think would be perfect for Ken, and it's called It Rides a Pale Horse by Andy Marino. So this is a horror novel for fans of Grady Hendrix, and Goodreads says it's a new horror fiction that is about obsession, greed, and the shocking actions we'll take to protect those we love, all set in a small town filled with dark secrets. And I thought that was just perfect for Ken, because, you know, Barbie Land is kind of a small place, and in the movie he gets a little obsessed, he gets a little greedy, you know what I'm saying? And it's got a horse on the front, and we know how much Ken loves horses and the patriarchy, so I thought this would be good for him. It's an adult horror thriller, and it looks really good. It's by an author that I'm really curious to read from, and I've heard really incredible things about this book and some of his other books from some other YouTubers, so I thought this would be a good one for Ken. And then next up, let's get into some of the other Barbies, shall we? So we have to talk about some of the other Barbies that were popular back in the early 2000s. So that was my era. When I was a kid, I was super into Barbies. I had like Barbie Land in my basement, basically. I had like the Barbie dolls, the houses, the Barbie cars, the Barbie horses, the whole kit and caboodle, basically. So I feel very certified to talk with you about these Barbies. So one of the Barbies that was super popular back in the day was one of the Barbies from the old animated Barbie movies, and so this one is Swan Lake Barbie. And Swan Lake Barbie, I'm sorry, but she's an icon. And so I thought it would be great to give her a book. And what is more perfect for Swan Lake Barbie than the maker of swans? You know what I'm saying? How many swan books do you know? Because I don't know a lot. But this one is one that's also high up on my TBR, and it's by Periac O'Donnell, which is one of my recent favorite authors. He is amazing. So he writes these really beautiful lyrical mystery novels. And so this one is about a man who has this sprawling English estate, and he is like high up in the ranks of the British aristocracy, and he has kind of like sequestered himself away in his house, and there's this woman who lives with him named Clara, and apparently she has some kind of like extraordinary gift that she's keeping hidden from everyone, and it sounds really interesting. And there's also a dead guy who winds up on the lawn of this rich Englishman named Mr. Crow. So Mr. Crow's butler realizes that he might have to uncover what happened with this dead guy, and he's trying to figure out if his master, Mr. Crow, like killed the guy or what happened, and he's trying to uncover the secret that this woman Clara has, and it has something to do with swans. And I thought that the magical kind of gift element of this, and the fact that it's set on this like sprawling beautiful estate, and it's got swans on the cover, it felt very Swan Lake to me personally. So that's my recommendation for that. And then next up, we have to talk about one of the things that I thought was like so funny and interesting about the Barbie movie is the whole discussion about pregnant Barbie. Because I had pregnant Barbie as a kid, and it was like one of my favorite Barbie dolls because I just thought that her red hair was like really beautiful and stuff. But they were talking about pregnant Barbie in the Barbie movie and how the company Mattel like retired this Barbie because everybody thought it was so weird to have a pregnant Barbie doll and like give it to young girls. And I see where that's weird, but I just thought it was so funny because that was like an actual Barbie that I had in the early 2000s. And so for this Barbie, I thought that the horror novel They Drown Our Daughters would be a good comparison, because for one thing, the purple on Barbie's dress like matches the purple cover really well. And They Drown Our Daughters is a horror novel about this generation of women, and in their family there's like this family curse that only affects the women, and they live in this small beachside town, and it's kind of touristy and stuff, and in the town their family is known to have this like curse, and the kids in town call it like the mermaid curse or whatever, and almost every woman in this family has drowned in some way and died. And when the women are young, they like hear this voice calling to them from the water, and it's really creepy, and a lot of them see this figure of this like woman with like long black hair like looking at them and like crawling out of the water, and they can like hear her voice when they listen to the seashells on the beach and stuff. It's really creepy. But it's an interesting generational story about women and motherhood and daughters and trying to protect your kids and all this different stuff. And we follow this woman, Meredith, and she was raised in this town, and she has just come back with her daughter because she's in the middle of getting like a separation with her wife. And so she comes back to this town with her daughter, and she starts hearing the voices in her head. And this whole time she kind of just thought her mom was like full of shit when her mom like warned her not to go near the water and stuff. But now she's starting to realize that like something might actually be wrong, and maybe the family curse is actually legit. And so anyways, this is a queer gothic horror novel, and I really enjoyed it. And I think that the ties to motherhood and the cover go really well with pregnant Barbie. And then next up, we have another Barbie that was really popular during the early 2000s with the whole animated Barbie movie franchise. And so we have Rapunzel Barbie. So this is another Barbie that I actually had as a kid, and it was another one of my favorites because she had super long hair, and when I was a kid I really was into like braiding their hair and stuff, and so I thought she was really cool. And I kept this Barbie for like many years. And so I thought this Barbie would pair really well with another novel on my TBR, and it's called The Book of Gothel. So this is a fantasy retelling about Mother Gothel from the Rapunzel story, and it's basically Mother Gothel's origin story. And so as it turns out, Mother Gothel was a witch, and it's kind of about her childhood and the reason why she went to the Tower of Gothel in the first place. So in the synopsis it says that the Tower of Gothel was originally for like women and girls who were like in need of help. And so our main character, who her original name is like something weird, like Hazelwise or something like that. Anyways, she ends up like getting kicked out of her house. Like I think one of her parents dies and the other parent like disowns her or something, and so she ends up going on this journey to find the Tower of Gothel because she needs someplace to go. And it's kind of just about her like coming of age story, and I've heard that it's a really good like cozy fantasy, so I thought it might be kind of cool to pair this with Rapunzel, because maybe if Rapunzel knew the backstory of Mother Gothel, they could come to an understanding. I don't know, but there's definitely like a connection there. So this is one that I've been wanting to read for a long time, and I think I might have to get this soon, because I remember I like almost bought it last year on my birthday, and then I was like, no, like the hardcover's really expensive, whatever, I'll wait until it's on Pango. But I think this would be a really wonderful cozy fantasy for people who are into that kind of thing, because that's kind of a subgenre that's becoming more and more popular. So The Book of Gothel, that's my recommendation for Rapunzel. Okay, and then next up we have these two Barbies, who were also from a animated Barbie movie called Princess and the Pauper. And so these two girls are like long lost sisters, I think, in this movie, and I thought that it would be interesting to pair this with a romance novel about sisters. So I want to recommend again The Magic by Lisa Kleypas. I know I've talked about this book 100 times, but I'm going to do it one more time. And this is a romance novel about this woman named Lady Aileen, and when she was growing up, she fell in love with this guy who was like the stable hand at her family's estate, and his name is McKenna, and they had this like whirlwind romance when they were teenagers. And then somebody found out about their relationship, and they got in big trouble because Aileen is like high up in society, and her dad is like a really prominent member of like the aristocracy and everything in England. And so her dad found out and basically like sent McKenna away. And Aileen knew that like McKenna was somebody who's really stubborn, and she knew he wouldn't leave if he knew that she still had feelings for him, and she didn't want him to come back because she was pretty sure that her dad was like gonna kill him if he found McKenna around the property. And so she lied to McKenna and told him that like she never cared about him, and she like totally broke his heart on purpose just to get him to leave because she wanted him to be safe. And so now it's many years later, and it's like 20 years later, I think, and so they're like, you know, grown now, and Aileen's father has died, and she and her sister still live at the estate. And McKenna comes back to visit the estate because he is now like this rich man, and he ended up like moving to America and getting involved in business, and now he's a super wealthy businessman. And so he and his friend have come to the estate to speak with Aileen's older brother, who's now like the head of the household, because they want to like make a business deal with him. And one thing leads to another, and McKenna and Aileen end up meeting again, and McKenna is like so pissed at her for what she did to him and how she broke his heart all those years ago. And so he's basically come back like for revenge. But of course, like, you know, their old flame is still there and stuff, and so they end up getting into some interesting situations. And then his friend who comes with him, who's an American, who's also really wealthy, ends up having this romance with Aileen's younger sister, Olivia. And so there's kind of this like double couple romance in this book, and it's really wonderful. Both of the couples are really good. I actually kind of prefer the younger sister's relationship, because I think her romance is really spicy and fun. And yeah, so I think this is a great one because this also has like sisters in it, and there's this double couple thing going on, just like in Princess and the Pauper, the Barbie movie. And so I thought that was a good fit. So this is one of my favorite historical romances of all time, so I definitely recommend you check it out if you have not yet done so. And then next, this is more of like a category of Barbies because mermaid Barbies are just super popular, and I always thought they were really cool as a kid. And so I thought for mermaid Barbie, the best book I could come up with was this new debut novel called Chlorine by Jade Song. So this is another horror novel, and it's about this woman, and when she was a kid, she got super into swimming. And when she was young, she got onto a swim team, and it's basically about her obsession with like swimming. And she talks about how like she and the other girls in her swim team basically like mutilated their bodies and like trained really hard and would like shave off all their body hair and like do all this stuff, and like they were super careful about their weight and like what they were eating and all these different things to try and like be the best swimmers they could be. And they got kind of like obsessive about it. And she also talks about her relationship with like her swim coach, who is a super creepy dude. And this woman is basically talking about how the more that she got into swimming, she started to believe that she was turning into a mermaid, and that was her goal. Like, she didn't want to be a human girl anymore. She wanted to become a mermaid. And she talks about when she was a kid, she had this like fantasy mermaid book that she was obsessed with too, and she basically just decided that she didn't want to be a human. She wanted to be a mermaid girl. And so anyways, it's very unsettling and creepy, and it's about how society puts all this pressure on young women and their bodies, and it's also about immigration, and it's sapphic, and it's all these different things. But it's very interesting and messed up and creepy, but really good. And I think this fits really well with the whole like mermaid Barbie aesthetic. Alrighty, and next up we have Beach Barbie. So it kind of talks about this in the Barbie movie with Ken, how he doesn't really have a job. His job is beach. He just hangs out on the beach all day. And when I was a kid, I also had a lot of these like beach Barbies that just like had bikinis and stuff, and that was just kind of the vibe. And so for that, I thought it would be fun to recommend a book that has a lot to do with like the ocean and kind of like sea life and stuff like that. So I wanted to recommend Monsters Born and Made. So this is a YA fantasy novel, and it's set in this fantasy world where everything is related to like the ocean, and they have these like ocean monsters that come out of the sea, and this society is really based around like class division, and they have to fight these different monsters, and it's kind of like this warrior society. And so we're following this 16-year-old girl named Coral and her brother Emmerich, and they're really close, and their job is to like raise these animals called meristags. And meristags are almost like giant, scary, like deer monsters that live in the ocean, and they have like big like horns and stuff, and they're venomous and they're really dangerous. But this family basically like captures meristags out of the sea and then breeds them, because in this society they have this competition called like the meristag races, and they ride these animals, and whoever wins takes like glory for their family and everything. It's a big deal. And so basically their family is kind of like enslaved to the aristocrats who run this whole meristag race, and basically the meristags are dying. And so the people who have sort of like enslaved their family in a way have basically told them like they have to catch more meristags from the sea for this next meristag race, otherwise they're not going to pay them, and the family will basically like starve to death. And so the back says, in an oceanic world swarming with vicious beasts, the ruling elite have indentured her family to provide the meristags for the glory race, a deadly chariot tournament reserved for the upper class. The winner receives gold and glory. The losers, if they're lucky, survive. When Coral fails to capture a meristag for this year's race, her family can't afford medicine for her chronically ill little sister. Coral's only choice is to do what no one has ever dared, cheat her way into the glory race. But Coral must race against contenders who have trained their whole lives and have no intention of letting a low-caste girl steal their glory. And when riots break out, Coral has to do more than win the race. She'll have to stop the whole island from burning. So yeah, this is a great novel. It was one of my favorite books of last year. It's very intense. There's a lot of like fight scenes and scenes with these like ocean monsters, and there's a little bit of a romance in here, and it's just really badass, to be honest. And it definitely has that like ocean beach vibe, but it's definitely not a beach read. It's a pretty hardcore book, but it's really fun and fast-paced, and I loved it. So I thought this was a good one for the beach Barbie vibe. Okay, and next up we have fairy Barbies. So back when I was a kid, there was this movie called BARBIE Fairytopia, and it was really cool. I still have like vivid memories from this movie of like rainbows and fairies and this like rainbow magic that the characters had. And so one of the Barbies from this movie that they made was called Dandelion, and that was also one of my favorite Barbies as a kid. And she's basically like a fairy, and her legs were like yellow and orange printed, and she had wings and everything. She had like long orange hair, and she was really cool. And so for the fairy Barbie, I wanted to recommend High Times in the Low Parliament. So this is a queer novella, and it's also fantasy, and it's basically about this woman named Lana, and she's a scribe, and she ends up getting into a weird situation where she gets sent off to Low Parliament, which is a big punishment in this world. And so she gets sent to Low Parliament to be a scribe there, and basically like take notes on everything that's happening in Low Parliament. And it's basically this weird government system where if they have a hung vote and like the committees can't decide on, you know, these different things, then the whole parliament like floods and everybody drowns and dies, and like the whole world goes back to war. And so right now they are like about to have another hung vote, and so everything in Low Parliament is like really tense and really on edge, and nobody wants to go there because everybody's scared that it's gonna flood and they're gonna get killed. And there's also fairies in Low Parliament, and so Lana ends up kind of teaming up with this fairy named Bugbite, and Bugbite and Lana and this other woman named Eloquentia, who is part of the like parliament political system, they kind of have to team up to save Low Parliament from being flooded and kind of sort out all of the political issues there. And it's actually really funny. They end up doing like a lot of like kind of like psychedelic drugs and telling a lot of stories and all this different stuff. And it's also sapphic. There's a lot of women in the story, and there's different relationships happening there, and like all the scribes are women, and there's all these fairies running around, and the fairies are very cranky, and I just think it's a really fun story if you're into fantasy and novellas and stuff like that. But it kind of reminded me of the like BARBIE Fairytopia world with the little like fuzzy kind of like fairy friends that the girls have in the movie, and just the vibe of it reminds me of that fairy Barbie that I had as a kid. So I thought that one would be fitting. That is all the recommendations I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching. If you got to the end of this video, leave me a pink heart emoji in the comments. And if you would like to see more videos from me, don't forget to like and subscribe if you want to see some more bookish content. And that is all I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in another video very soon. Bye!
He begged me to stay. Babe, I'm not staying, I just wanna play. In the party, he just wanna romp. Big boots in the bus, they talk.